Thank you, Phil. I want to say hi to you here today and everybody joining us online. We've been students these days, the last few weeks, of the greatest words about love ever written. And we've been looking at the passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And what we're doing is we're rescuing this passage from the quicksand of romantic captivity to weddings and flowers and frilly dresses that never get worn again and overly long toasts and garter throwing, because love is to be the criteria of everything we do. Spiritual maturity is measured by love. Amen. Period. Paul does not write this passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 13 as a Valentine's card to Corinth. He actually writes it because they were terrible at love. We looked at how the basic message he sends is, do the opposite of what you normally do. Do the opposite. We've been learning that love requires the acquisition of character. We often think, I'd be more loving, God, I would be more loving if you would just give me more lovable people in my life. Yeah? But Paul does not say, go find more lovable people to be around. He says, commit to allowing God to grow you into a more loving person. Here's that verse, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It's not irritable. And it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, Amen. Never loses faith, Amen. Is always hopeful, Amen. And endures through every circumstance. Last week, we saw that love is envy-free. If you haven't caught up on that message, it's online. You can do that on our YouTube channel. It's there. But envy-free. To love means to have an inner orientation where, through the power of God, I will and I work for the good of another person. Here's the text we're going to look at in this message. Love is not irritable. Love is not irritable. Okay, that's actually the whole message. Sometimes you hear a sermon and somebody asks you afterward, what's it about? What was it about? And you think, I don't even know. It's really irritating. Okay? This is one of those messages where I promise you, you will know what it's about. Love is not irritable. Okay? That's needed because life is full of irritants. An irritant is anything that causes frustration. A boss's unreasonable request, a poor service at a restaurant, a relative who's deliberately rude, or a co-worker who makes you look bad at a meeting. Okay? You're running late, traffic is terrible, somebody deliberately and arrogantly cuts in front of you, and you find yourself seized with a desire to gesture at them in a non-faith-based way. Okay? That's irritation. The number one irritant in life, of course, is other people. Okay? We say at our church, everybody's welcome, and that's true. It's also true that everybody is irritating in some way. Okay? But Paul says, love is not irritable. Notice he does not say love never gets angry. Anger is an emotion that we experience when our will is frustrated. The purpose of anger is to provide the energy to deal with the frustration. Irritability, it's been said, is a mood. Moods are longer lasting than emotions. Okay? A mood is a predisposition or a tendency to have a certain kind of emotion. And generally speaking, there are two kinds of moods, good moods and bad moods. Irritability would be one form of bad mood. Okay? Moods or moodiness is deeply related to our spiritual condition. And when we seek transformation that is beyond just our willpower or trying to manage our sinfulness, we want the transformation of our moods. if I really believe, like the way I believe in gravity, if I really believe that there is a good God who created everything and that He's working in everything for good, and that God is the person that Jesus described, that is joyful and He's a generous being, and that I'm His beloved child, and that all of my sins have been forgiven forever on the cross, and that nothing can separate me from His love, and His eye is on the sparrow, so I know that He's watching me. And that surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and that there is now no condemnation for those like me who are in Christ Jesus. And because of the empty tomb, death itself has lost its sting, and God is able to do exceedingly abundantly more than I can ask or imagine. What kind of mood do you think I will tend to be in? Hey? Well, that would be a good mood, okay? Love and joy and peace will be the default mode. If I'm mostly in an irritable mood, my mind is probably thinking about thoughts other than those thoughts that I just mentioned. And by the way, who is in charge of your mind?
You are.
Okay? Who runs the programming department of your thoughts? Who is responsible for deciding how your thinking will be focused all through the day? Well, that would be you, yeah? This is very important when we think about love. The greatest and the ultimate freedom is the ability to decide what will occupy your mind. The greatest and the most important freedom in your life, which nobody can take from you, is the ability to decide what you will focus your thinking on. An irritable person is somebody who is predisposed to become angry. Their body and their mind are poised for it. Their neurocircuitry has literally become wired for anger and irritability. And this happens. It happens. They habitually dwell on irritation-producing thoughts without even noticing it. Where does an irritable person tend to get angry? Is it limited to one location? No, they get angry anywhere, at work, at home, at school, in the car, watching the news, on social media. We live in what's sometimes called the age of outrage. Yeah? In a restaurant, at the pub, at the supermarket, in a parking lot, at the post office. People even get mad at church. It just ticks me off. Events that a joyful person would simply be able to accept with patience and try to help out in some way, or simply not to notice. You're in line at Tesco or at Starbucks, and the customer at the counter gets into a conversation, at the coffee shop with the barista. You ever had that? Somebody in front of you doing that, right? They get into a conversation, they're laughing and they're teasing and they're making small talk. And if I'm in a hurry and impatient and focused on myself, I'm thinking, what's the matter with that guy? Just get your coffee and get out. They ought to have a rule that if you talk too long, you don't get no coffee all day. Or if I've died to myself, and if Jesus and I are in line together, I might think, what a good thing this customer is treating that worker with warmth and with dignity like a human being. That kind of inspires me. I want to see if I can make that person smile. It's exactly the same set of circumstances with just this difference. Love is not irritable. Again, Paul does not write here, you try really, really hard to not be irritable. You don't become non-irritable by trying really hard to not be irritable. Okay? I aim at being pervaded by and living in and being immersed through the love of God. That's what we discussed last week. Irritability, though, is a gateway drug. It leads to sarcasm and resentment, and over time it destroys marriages, it can damage children, and eventually it can lead to hostility and even violence. Not all irritable people are violent, but for sure all violent people are irritable. They often start with irritability. Love is not that way. Love is not irritable. By the way, what is this message about? Love is not irritable. Okay. What is it that produces an irritable character? Well, this is connected to the very next observation that Paul makes about love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. He goes on to say in verse 5, love keeps no record of wrongs. What does that mean? No record of wrongs. Well, we are all record keepers. Whether you like it or not, we are all record keepers, okay? We all have certain memories and certain thoughts that we store up in our minds and bring back to our awareness on a regular basis. We just are wired that way. Irritable people keep a record of when they have been wronged and by whom. They do this in their minds. They do this by recalling and even rehearsing, playing it again and again in their mind like a rerun. They play all of the wrong things that have been done to them. And I replay events in my memory and I feel again that surge of emotion that I felt that when I was unjustly hurt. And I enjoy the same sense of moral superiority that gives me over that person who hurt me. I enjoy indulging in self-pity at that point. I find other people to tell the story to who will reinforce my victimhood and encourage my moral outrage. I think about it at night. I know all about this, guys. Let me tell you, I know all about this. My spiritual gift, Nikki will tell you, is pouting. Okay? The first thing that happened to me when I came into the world is a doctor slapped me for no good reason at all. And I've held it against him ever since, right? And if I could remember Bible verses as well as I can remember times that I've been wronged, I would have the entire Bible memorized by now. And of course, after a while, that playlist goes on autopilot in your mind. It's like Pandora. Your mind knows your greatest hits list and replays it, okay? And after a while, you don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just on autopilot. You might wonder, why in the world would anybody do this? Well, a wonderful writer by the name of Friedrich Buchner, I think that's how you say it in German, put it like this, okay? Of the 7 deadly sins, anger is possibly the most fun. To lick your wounds, to smack your lips over grievances long past, to roll over your tongue the prospect of bitter confrontations still to come, to savor till the last toothsome morsel both the pain you are given and the pain you are giving back. In many ways, it's a feast fit for a king. The chief drawback is that what you are wolfing down is yourself. Wow. The skeleton at the feast is you. Wow. And of course, sin is always that way. It is forbidden by God because it destroys human beings that we sin against, and it destroys us as well. Now, here's what's critical. Love keeps records. Love keeps records. It just doesn't keep records of wrongs. Okay? It keeps other records because we're all record keepers. God has given us this amazing gift of memory and record keeping, and it's part of what gives us identity. Love remembers gifts to be grateful to God for. Qualities in other people that I really admire. Moments of joy that I get to savor, or remember suffering that might actually help me and do something with that experience. Injustice that I might actually be able to help relieve in others. Love remembers reasons for hope. Love keeps a record of rights. Paul put it like this: whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. The greatest freedom in your life is the freedom to decide what your mind is going to dwell on. And irritable people place their minds in the wrong stuff, not the stuff that we're reading in Paul's book here. Paul actually uses the same exact word in his Philippians passage that he uses in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We are commanded where we are to focus our minds. Indulging in wrong thinking is a sin. It just is. Nobody can see it, and we don't get into trouble for it, but it is. And this matters to God because God has created your mind and your brain to be record keepers, guys. Every time you think a new thought, new synapses get formed. With every new thought, that makes it easier for you to think that thought more quickly the next time. Love thinks excellent thoughts.
Yeah.
That's why loving actions and loving words flow more and more automatically out of a loving person, because they reflect their thoughts going on the inside. Love keeps excellent records. In love, I live in the recurring thought that I'm loved and I'm cared for by God. And then that leads me to look for other people I might show love to. To whom might I show kindness? That's the question we had last week, or possibly the week before. To whom might I show kindness? That's love's question. Guys, you can do this. You can start doing this now. This is part of the secret of living in love through the power of God. Love keeps a record of rights, not wrongs. Joy, gratitude. Why wouldn't I do that? Admiration, beauty, service, virtue, care of the suffering, courage in the face of injustice, laughing babies and lingering sunsets and the aging faces of saints who have followed God for a long time. Love says, is there anyone whom I can show kindness to? Love is not irritable. Seems like such a trivial little word, irritable. But a soul can live or die. A soul can hang on it.
Wow.
Israel, in the book of 1 Samuel, they'd won a great battle. King Saul was in charge of Israel at that time. But they'd won a great battle against their enemies, and people were celebrating. The women were celebrating. They were singing songs. They were celebrating. They were singing songs about how King Saul had slain thousands of the enemy, and David had slain 10,000s of the enemy. You remember that song? We're told in the Bible that Saul was very angry after that song. This refrain displeased him greatly, it says. What kind of mood was Saul in? Well, he was in a bad mood. In particular, he was irritable. You could easily translate this, that this refrain irritated him greatly. Why was he in a bad mood? Well, certain thoughts had taken root in his mind. Thoughts like, the people like David more than they like me. Nobody wants me to be king. I'll probably get no credit at all that I really deserve. David is probably trying to take my crown. It's my crown. I will keep my crown at all costs. I cannot share it with anybody. Saul brooded over envy and resentment and fear and pride. Notice he could have been in a great mood. I mean, Israel had just won a battle, guys. He's in a bad mood after a victory. Israel had just won a battle. And he was the king. And David worked for him. David was loyal to him. So he could have been thinking thoughts of great joy and gratitude, but his habitual thoughts meant that precisely the conditions that would have produced joy and gratitude in another leader produced resentment in him, and that ripened into hate. If you read his story, you'll find he is consistently in a foul mood, consistently, and it leads him to hate. He eventually tries to kill David, and his son Jonathan, who'd become David's best friend at that point. When Jonathan found out what his dad was doing, Jonathan confronted his dad, King Saul, because that's also what love does, by the way. It does confront. But his dad threw a spear at Jonathan to kill his own son. Here's what happened next. The text says that Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. The Bible, of course, is not a book of moral object lessons, but I think we're to understand in this case, Jonathan's anger was good and a noble thing to do in that instance. Saul was counting on Jonathan to be afraid. He did that, hoping Jonathan would be afraid. Why? Because fear is a high-energy, negative emotion that causes you to flee a problem and run away. Anger is a high-energy, negative emotion that inclines you to approach a problem head-on, and Jonathan does. It's a good thing that he gets angry there and not afraid like Saul thought he would be, because Jonathan actually saves his friend David. You might be wondering, When am I entitled to fierce anger? I know that's going in your mind right now. When am I allowed to have fierce anger? Because that sounds like a lot of fun. Okay? Well, if your father is trying to kill your best friend, and when you talk to him about it, he heaves a spear at your head, and then I think it's probably a healthy response then, right? A lack of anger, when anger is called for, can be a serious problem. Same as the presence of anger when anger is not called for, but it's also a serious problem. So managing anger is an enormous challenge for you and I. It's amazing that even though Jonathan was fiercely angry at his father in that moment, he ended his life by fighting loyally at his father's side. It's more amazing that when Saul and Jonathan were both dead, David asked, "Is there anyone left in the house of Saul?" Remember that question? And there was. There were a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this, right? Here's somebody you can name your child after, right? Maybe, tongue twister. Young Mephibosheth, right? Who David could show kindness to. Mephibosheth, you want to say that yourself? Tell somebody next to you, Mephibosheth. There you go, he's an expert. Mephibosheth was the grandson of King Saul. Right? He should have been David's rival and enemy. Yet, 4 times in this little story, it says that Mephibosheth ate at the king's table. You don't want to say that name too many times. Why would David do this? David told us in his most famous psalm, Psalm 23, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I lack nothing." And then he goes on to say, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." David says to himself, "I think I'll feed him. You know, everybody would think he's my enemy. He's the grandson of the former king who tried to kill me. He could be my rival for the throne, but I'll have him over for dinner instead." Love is patient. Love is kind. Love endures all things. Love is long-suffering. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love is not irritable. It's amazing. It's a lot easier to talk about love than it is to actually love. Isn't it? That's because one other difficult, courageous step that love takes that irritation never will. Love will do something that resentment, bitterness, and holding a grudge refuse to do. It involves a little metaphor I want to talk about this morning, kind of a parable that often floats around, particularly in recovery circles for people, you know, that are dealing with an addict. One version of it goes like this. There's a group of addicts on a boat called recovery. And they're sailing to sobriety, to freedom, to moral sanity. And a woman named Mary gets to the dock and she sees that the boat has just left and she's missed it. Everybody on the boat yells for her to dive in and swim to them. "Come on, Mary!" She does. She dives into the water, but she's having trouble swimming, and she starts going down, and it becomes apparent that she's holding on to this rock. Everybody on the boat yells, "Drop the rock, Mary, drop the rock." She looks down, and the rock is all of her resentments and all of her bitterness, all of her wounds and all the wrong, terrible things that people have done or that she imagines have done to her through all of the years of her life. The rock is her pride. The rock is her stubbornness. She thinks to herself, if I don't have this rock, who will I be? My rock is what makes me feel superior to the person who wronged me. My rock is my excuse for my miserable life. Then, in a moment of moral sanity that is a gift from God, she thinks, why would I cling to what only makes me miserable? Why am I holding on to this stupid rock? It has destroyed my joy. It has embittered my spirit. It has poisoned my past. It ruins my future. It's killing me. So she lets go and she is free. And there's a lightness now to her body and her spirit. And she swims to the boat and climbs on board and everybody cheers. And then they see another guy jump off the dock to join them. And he starts going down. And Mary yells, drop the rock, drop the rock. Love is not irritable. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love drops the rock. The place I want to suggest to you for all of those rocks is the cross. That's the place where sin met love and love won. That's the place where I receive ultimate forgiveness. And if I'm going to receive ultimate forgiveness from God at infinite cost of the life of Jesus, how can I refuse to forgive another human being for a debt when I've been forgiven an infinite debt at the cost of the life of Jesus? So, I'm setting my rock down. I wish I had a rock here. Setting my rock down. This is all of my resentments, all of my bitterness, all of my hurts, all of my wounds, all of my grudges that foster this horrible sense of superiority or self-pity. Drop the rock. What rock are you holding on to? Drop the rock. Make this day that you drop the rock. I'm asking everybody in our church, at South City Church, those here and those listening online, maybe it's a little irritating rock that is just festering a little bit. Maybe it's a really heavy rock. I understand. Maybe you're not even sure what all of it will mean when you set it down. Maybe somebody has abused you or damaged you or betrayed you, and maybe they have not repented. So you're not able to enter into a relationship of trust with them. You're not able to reconcile because they're not willing to acknowledge the truth or to be contrite or to repent. I don't know what all of that means. There is no necessary formula for all of that. But one thing I do know, and you have to listen to this, is that you can still put the rock down. You can do it today. You have to do it today. Just say, God, I'm putting this problem, this person, this burden in your hands. I'm tired of carrying this weight in my mind and on my soul day after day after day. I need my hands for other things, for better things. I'll tell you something, guys. It's pretty frustrating to go through a chunk of time when your hands cannot do anything else because they just have to hold on to that stupid rock. That's true. If your hands are holding physical rocks, I promise you guys, I promise you, it's infinitely truer of your soul and that spiritual burden. You cannot carry it anymore. You have to put it down. It'll kill your heart. I know that we're all kind of reluctant to let them go. They make us miserable, they kill us, but we hate to let them go. So I want to tell you why it's so important, and then we'll close. The word rock is a really important Bible word. It's used in the Bible dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Interestingly enough, it refers to our God. Yeah, the psalmist says, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. Truly, He is my rock and my salvation. The rock in the ancient world was often a picture. They didn't have drills or explosives. It was a picture of strength. The idea here is, I don't hold the rock holds me.